course is actually not specifically about concrete. This is actually our freshman introduction course. And so it's actually been overhauled, and I'm going to give you a little bit of context for all that goes into this course, because it's a pretty large, pretty complicated course to teach in a normal setting. And so taking it to a hybrid version added just that much more fun. I have to give a lot of credit to my co-authors, Art Schmidt and Jeff Raisler, who have been working on developing this course in its overhauled form for almost 10 years already. And so it was just recently that I came in and I helped them move it online into this hybrid mode. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give you some background and just kind of describe the goals of this overhaul. It's just a really unique situation where we were finally getting ready to launch this massive undertaking, and then COVID hit. So it was, we're going to do this huge change. Oh, now we also have to figure out how to do it online. And so I'll talk about some of those key components and how we redesigned it. So the first question is, well, why did we need to overhaul this course? Most of you are probably familiar with your curriculum's introduction to engineering course. Maybe it's a general type of introduction to all engineering. Maybe it's specific to civil. Well, for our department, we had one that was specific to civil. It met once a week for 1 hour. And it was largely seminar based, where students would come and hear from a faculty member from a different area of civil engineering. Maybe we would bring in some alumni speakers, things like that. And with a 1 credit, once a week meeting, we really felt in the department that it wasn't necessarily meeting all of the objectives that we could actually have it meet. And so at the same time, the curriculum is kind of undergoing a little bit more massive overhaul across the entire curriculum, where we're working to thread in a lot more professional development and intentional kind of non-technical content in many of our courses, all the way through the curriculum. So you can see up here, these were kind of our longitudinal threads, starting with, writing and communication, data and computation, design thinking, entrepreneurial mindsets, and then just developing professional skills and competency in the profession as a whole. And we want to be able to touch on all of these topics at each level of the curriculum. So as we're going through this overhaul, we know we might have a bit of a weakness in the current form of our introduction course. We said, well, this is a great time to just really do a massive overhaul and look at building as much of this content into this freshman course as possible. Now, that obviously is going to necessitate some big changes from a credit level as well. So, as I said, this has been ongoing. I think this was started in about 2015 was the first kind of iteration and pilot. So this has been going on for quite some time. So start with this seminar course, largely given by faculty. Faculty would come, they'd talk about their research. We can do a little bit more with that. So the first thing is we're rewriting the learning objectives. And so we maintained this first one where we want to be able to describe the areas of study in the civil and environmental engineering department. One thing about the University of Illinois, if you know anything about it, it's a pretty large department. We have over 50 faculty. We have 10 areas of study that students can specialize in at the undergraduate level. That's like drinking from a fire hose when the student may not really even have a great idea about what a civil engineer is doing. And so the first thing we need to do is really just educate them about what goes into the profession. The second part is, well, okay, so if we start in the department, then we also have to think about what's outside the department and what are the directions that these students are going to go when they graduate. Again, with a large department, we have a huge diversity in our graduates. So we get a lot of students that are going into more entrepreneurial type careers. They are going to law school. They are going into kind of non-typical civil engineering paths. And so we want to make sure that all students at least are aware of the fact that you don't have to necessarily go and sit at a desk designing something per a code for the rest of your life. There are kind of other options out there. Now, this is where we wanted to start to build in professional skills. So we said we want to actually get them used to college. That a lot of students coming out of high school, right? All of our engineering students, they were probably top in their high school. They come to college and they find out, oh, now I actually have to work in addition to just being smart. Well, they don't always get that in some of the other types of courses. So we said, let's make sure we take care of it here. And so we wanted to add some rigor, which then again, you remember the course this was replacing was a single credit. So we as we formulated these learning objectives, we knew that, okay, we're going to have to come up with a little bit more credit as well. We want to be able to start processing and presenting data. One of our key lab-based materials courses doesn't hit until about their junior year, where they really have to start working with Excel, work on presenting data, making data look professional. Well, by then again, we can make a bit of an improvement to the curriculum, and we're going to introduce some of those skills earlier. And then the next one is the one all undergrads, I think, universally hate. It's that communication piece. This is something that our alumni have come back to us repeatedly. They love our students. They are great technically. You ask them to write and it's like torture. So with that in mind, let's start to introduce this concept of technical writing. And then we're going to reinforce that every year. We're not just going to give it to them in their lab course as a sophomore or junior. We're not just going to give it to them in that senior design type course. We're actually going to start to build these skills on day one with them. And then if students hate writing the most, the next thing they hate the most usually is working in a team. And so I can take an unofficial poll here, but I would assume that all of you who have been around academia long enough, you realize that in academia, in the profession, everywhere you go, you're going to be working with a team. You're going to be working with other people. We have how many committees here at ACI? This is something you don't get away from. And so again, we want to start building these skills early and reinforcing them throughout. So then these skills map over to those longitudinal threads that I talked about with professional skills, data and computation, writing and communication, et cetera, et cetera. The newest one that we've added really is this entrepreneurial mindset. Our university's recently become a member of the Keen network, if you are familiar with that, which is promoting entrepreneurial mindset learning. And so as part of describing potential career paths, we've actually been a little bit more intentional about bringing in some of our alumni who have been more on the entrepreneurial side, either with some type of startup company or who are more innovative inventor type people. And I can give you an example a little bit later about that. So we have these objectives, and then we said, okay, we really want to formulate this new course. And so the course design, we broke into these different parts that are going to reinforce and help us to achieve our learning objectives. We said we wanted to be project-based because, again, if we want them to work as a team, we want them to do some writing, we want them to be introduced to the profession, hey, a project makes a lot of sense for that. This is also a good way to start to build camaraderie with the students and help them to function as a cohort. So I actually went through this program as an undergrad myself. And, so I had that 1-hour seminar. Well, I didn't know anybody in that 1-hour seminar. You go to the seminar, you listen, and you go home. But with this, we're working to actually build a little bit more of a community with our students in that cohort, especially when you start talking about this class is going over 200 students this fall. We want to make it to be a little bit more accessible community. So after deciding that it's going to be this project-based course, we divide that into different components to support that. And with that, okay, so it's a project, they have to write a report about it. So the first thing we do is we go through this series of exercises on sections of a report. Talk about the differences between technical and creative writing, emphasizing that writing is a process. It's not just about the end product. We start to do these skill building assignments where we're looking at data collection, data management, research skills, things like that. We use these case study speakers as we pull from internal candidates as faculty and external candidates from our alumni to highlight careers, types of jobs. This is where we can communicate just some of the logistics of the curriculum. So if you like structural engineering, what's your course path look like? So that's where this all takes place. Great thing about civil engineering is it is visual. We can see what we actually do. So we take them on field trips. A lot of these are either on campus or very near to campus. Thankfully, again, with a large university, there's always construction somewhere. So we can go and see construction sites. We can talk about different civil engineering problems that are ongoing within our campus. And so then as a project-based course, the project is a semester-long feasibility study that the students develop and report on as the semester goes along. And so this was the plan. This is how it started to be developed and implemented. It was launched as a free elective, kind of. It didn't even make it all the way up into a technical elective. So students had to find out about this class. They had to actually seek it out. And so the first several years, it was not our freshman target audience. It actually was more comprised of sophomores, juniors, and even a couple seniors took it because it sounded interesting. And with that iteration, you can see I was trying to tie each of these components to how it was delivered. So the report is kind of a classic lecture, and then some in-class exercises to kind of help reinforce that content with the report. These skill assignments, the whole day is just dedicated to running Excel and managing data, communicating that data. The case study, well, these were lectures given by the faculty. We try to cherry pick our more dynamic faculty. We've helped them curate and develop presentations that are high impact and high interactivity. And then with the field trips, those kind of change every single year as things get built, as things start to go under construction. And then with this project, right, well, it's a lot of group work. There's a lot of, especially in those early years where there was only about 30 in the class, there was a lot of very hands-on mentoring, both by teaching assistants, but by the faculty. We engage our facilities office pretty heavily to get their input on different projects. And then they also provide a lot of information, but then some of them will even go so far as to start mentoring some of these groups as they work through this feasibility project. So that was the original iteration and that got to work pretty well with these 30 to about 40 numbers of enrollment. And so then I actually was at another university. I moved back to U of I. And so the first thing they said is, okay, one of the first things we want you to do is we want to take it from 30 students to 200 students. And so you got the summer to figure that out. And okay, that doesn't sound too bad. And that was our goal. So how it looked with 200 students is so I was the third faculty that was brought on. We were able to increase our graduate teaching team to 4 students. They manage the TAs do a lot of the grading. They do a lot of office hours and different types of mentoring operations to support these project teams. And as far as technology is, we wanted to always keep things a little bit simple on the technology front. Once you start to introduce many systems to the students, it just gets to be overwhelming. We've done some internal studies within the university, and it was something like 8 or 9 different learning management systems, programs, communication apps that students were using on average. And especially if you were in like the computer science, then that number went up a little bit. But for the most part, we wanted to do our best to kind of streamline it with the number of different softwares we were using. Additional technology that we can utilize are eye clickers. If you've never used it, it kind of looks like something like this. But it's just a remote response system. It has physical remotes, but it also has an app that you can now run on your phone. And that was important for reasons that I'll talk about here shortly. The other thing that we used is we had already had in place at least in our building, we've been running this online master's degree program. So we had recording software, live streaming software, and hardware already set up way before the pandemic. And so the live streaming system is called Echo 360. And so we were using Echo 360 in addition to Zoom once the pandemic set in. So as I said, I started in fall of 2020. This was when we were going to do a full rollout, but with pandemic, with a lot of deferments and enrollment, obviously there were a lot of challenges. At our university, I think it's important to always provide the context for the restrictions we were working under. We had the 6-foot social distancing, rooms at half capacity, which isn't abnormal. But the problem is when you have, and I included the pictures for this, you can see these tables are fixed. And so just because they said half capacity, that 6-foot social distancing, once you got the measuring stick out, for our big one, that half capacity dropped down to about 1/3. And so that room is normally about 150 students, so it could hold just under 50 with the pandemic. So that was kind of a big challenge that we had to face. We had masking requirements. I think masking definitely hinders communication, especially when you get English as a second language type students. They can't see that pronunciation, so that can be a challenge to help build rapport with them when they can't understand you well. And then with, I bring up, we had regular testing. We were one of those schools that required students to test every other day or twice a week. It was tied to an app they had on their phone. They had basically security at every door. And so what that amounted to is if you didn't have your test in, if you didn't get the result in, if you were exposed, you couldn't come to class. So we had to be very, very mindful of that when students would not show up for class. Well, a lot of times it was, some type of logistics related to this regular testing. So those were the challenges. So with this partial rollout, we did it to about half of our freshmen. We had a bunch of deferments so that they were going to start the following year. And then we only did this with freshmen, this first iteration. And to get around the room capacity, or not get around it, but to address the room capacity, because we had 90 students, our biggest lecture hall in our building could only fit 50. Well, we took another lecture hall in the same building. And so these two rooms are actually, one's right directly over the other. And what we did is we actually did live streaming of what was going on upstairs to the downstairs. We stole the wireless mics from upstairs, brought them downstairs. And so the faculty who were upstairs and downstairs, we were on the phone constantly or texting constantly. And we'd actually be able to relay our questions upstairs to the guest speakers and things like that. And so just that really simple act of, well, we're just going to move the wireless mics, and thankfully the classroom was close enough. We were able to actually get a lot of communication and amongst a bigger group. We did a lot with Zoom, obviously, as everybody did. But we encouraged all of our students to always bring laptops. So even the in-person students, we'd put them on Zoom for some of this group project work in the classroom. Okay, and so, maybe 2 people from the same group would be in the classroom, 2 people would be remote. Well, everybody would be on Zoom together. And then that way that helped to make those remote students not just feel like the afterthought and, the ones that were always the odd people out. That kind of helped to streamline some of that. We would have TAs actively monitoring Zoom and this Echo streaming software, because in both places, depending on the remote student, they could log into both. And so then we'd have questions coming from both, which was a little bit of a challenge. We'd also use Zoom for our field trips. And this was actually something that I think we're going to keep post when everything is, COVID's hopefully a distant memory. But with the size of our class, a field trip of 200 students is a challenge. Okay, and so one of our field trips, our first field trip, is always, there's a creek that runs through campus, and this creek has a long and storied history of flooding, and we talk about the civil engineering implications of what happens when they made changes to the creek, and while we walk them down the creek and tell them the history as we pass different landmarks. Well, doing that with 200 students is not a great idea when you have to cross a bunch of busy streets. And so what we're doing now is the tour guide, who's one of the faculty in the instructional team, he actually will do the tour in person with his phone. All the students will still follow, but we can basically spread them out, across a quarter or half a mile. Okay, and we have all the students with their phones on Zoom so they can listen to the speaker. The speaker is showing exactly what he's talking about on Zoom, so you can watch on Zoom, and then when you pass it, then you can actually see it. And students actually like that, and it saves the voice of our instructor. He doesn't have to project out to this crowd across the quad. So that was 2020. 2021, we scaled things up to the full size, and so this was just this past fall. Big differences that the rooms could now be at full capacity. We still had masks, but no social distancing. We still had this contract tracing, regular testing for the students, and the building access control. So we still had to have this hybrid option available because, again, students could show up, their app flashes red, they have to go home and try again later. But this way, by maintaining a lot of these practices, we'll be able to still allow students to kind of make up class when this happens. This room, you can tell, is very different setup than the ones I showed previously, the previous one. The chairs weren't bolted to the ground, but the desks were. This is more set up as an active learning classroom in our new campus instructional facility that has all the latest, greatest instructional layouts for classrooms. And so in this one, it can house over 220, it's like 230 students is how many it'll seat. And they're all seated around these tables, 8 to a table. And then they have projectors, a big projector on one side, but then smaller TVs circling the whole thing. There's whiteboards circling the whole thing. So it's a really nice classroom if you're going to do a lot of group work. So again, we use Zoom for the field trips, temporary absences. We actually found that, hey, guest speakers don't necessarily like driving down from Chicago to Champaign. It's like 2.5 hours if there isn't traffic, okay? And so now all of a sudden we can kind of open the playbook, so to speak, and go after any alumni that we want to engage. We have alumni doing cool things all over the place. So this year we had one of our alumni who's running a software business out of the UK currently. And so he actually called in, and it was midnight or 1 a.m. for him, but he called in and actually was able to deliver a remote lecture over, or his presentation over Zoom. He fielded student questions throughout, and it worked really, really well. And so this is probably kind of the model we're going to continue to follow, at least for now. We'll see how things continue to shape up. So with each of these components of the class, just want to highlight how did we actually move this to online and make it bearable to listen to. Okay, so pre-COVID, I said this one was kind of a lecture, and then we'd put them into small groups, kind of the think, pair, share, and have them do some group writing, things like that. Well, during COVID, because we didn't know who was going to be where, and we were, you don't ever want to really trust technology. So we switched to more of a flipped model where we do the pre-recorded lecture. And so then when they come to class, then the whole class is spent on, okay, now we're just going to have you do writing exercises. We've been able to build in more peer revision with these writing exercises. So you write an introduction, pass it to your neighbor, or in this case, we require laptops. So you write it on your laptop, slide your laptop over for somebody else to read it, get that feedback, and you continue to develop. We've kind of flipped how we've done that. And it's a mix of group and individual efforts for these types of different exercises. With this one also, with the skill building, with the Excel, okay, so they're on their laptops anyway. And so there's a short video that they have to watch, tell them where all the buttons are on Excel, tell them how to use them. And then they come to class and they have to do this structured exercise. Okay, and this is where it's nice to have that full instructional team. And we just basically will walk around for 2 hours, supporting the students, answering questions, and making sure that they can complete the exercises as planned. Here's our field trip, what it looks like now. And so we said, well, 200 students probably still a little much to string across campus. So what we actually do staged field trips where half the class will go to one place on a day, the other half goes to a secondary location, and then the next day we just same field trips, but we swap the groups. So that way the students see all the same content, and we just run it the same way. They have to bring phone, headphones, and we just pre-prepare this, or we always send out announcements saying, today for class, you're going to need these things. We're going to be doing this stuff. Bring comfortable shoes, dress for, the weather, things like that. We do, in 2020, at the height of the pandemic, a couple of our locations were closed off to us. We go to a wastewater treatment site. which I don't think anybody was really upset about not going to the wastewater treatment facility. But that one, we recorded lectures or recorded the field trips before. And so we can have that now as a resource for, okay, maybe next year we can be in person, but oh, now thunderstorms are rolling through. And so it's probably not the best idea to go walk along our Boneyard Creek here. So now we have these resources that the pandemic has generated for us. For these case studies, as I said, it's internal, external candidates. The external candidates really like this type of format because they have the option to travel. So some of them use it as a way to justify a day off. Others just love talking to students, so then we can incorporate a more diverse group of guest speakers and be flexible with their particular schedules. Now, our alumni speakers usually just talk about their careers. Our internal speakers, our faculty, present their discipline, their area as a case study, not necessarily this is what it is to be a geotechnical engineer. And so Dr. Raisler represents the materials area where he talks about concrete pavement design and work we've done with O'Hare and using recycled materials and things like that. The one I have pictured here, this is from our geotech group that does a lot of tunneling. And so this lecture is, again, very interactive with the students using these iClicker systems where we have the students think through, okay, if you're planning this tunneling operation to run these metro lines, how do you make the decisions about where the stops should be? Because if you ask a community, do you want a metro stop? They all say, well, yeah, absolutely. But then you lose the advantage of the metro if it has to stop every 150 yards. Okay. And so we have them go through that, have them do a lot of these clicker responses where they can respond remotely on a phone if they're sitting in their dorm, or with the physical remotes if they're sitting in class. So the last component was the thing I think we were worried about the most, and it was this semester project. It was a group project. We want them to go out on campus, find a problem that's related to engineering on campus, come back, propose that project, and then kind of write a feasibility study of what their solution would look like. And so it has 3 brainstorming sessions where you are sharing ideas, you're getting some feedback from the mentors. We were able to move this completely onto Zoom using breakout rooms. You just rename the breakout rooms based on the area that they were interested in. And so we were able to still maintain a lot of conversation, even in a highly remote type setting. The group formation, thankfully, the students were pretty comfortable with Zoom, so they could set up their Zoom rooms with ease. And because we were forming groups around project ideas, well, the students, if they wanted to work on a project, they would gladly accept some remote students and some in-person students. So it was not any major challenge or difficulty getting the remote students to mix with the in-person students. We'd have 2 and 2 or 1 and 3 or some manner of that, because it was formed based on their choosing of the topic. So after that is all set up, they have to do data collection. A lot of the data collection was remote anyway. They're looking at resources at the library. They're communicating with our facilities people. A lot of that gets facilitated through our TAs. They're kind of our point people on coordinating a lot of that sharing. Now with the final reports, final presentations, this is where they are saying, okay, the project we're proposing, This is where it's feasible. This is where it's not feasible. This is the data we've collected. We used to do that as a poster session, and we'd take the entire civil engineering atrium and fill it with posters. Well, when you have 30 students, we had about 7 or 8 groups. Lots of faculty would come. It was a very enjoyable time. But you scale that up to this fall, we had 48 groups. That doesn't work so well because we want to judge the posters. We want to judge how well they answer questions. And so we actually move this back, and we'll probably keep it online for this foreseeable future because here we can incorporate our faculty still, but now we can add in all of our alumni. And we add in a bunch of facilities people. They will come, and then this is a way for them to engage back with our department and watch these student presentations. They're able to take a lot of this information, the students are, and then generate that final written report, which again is reinforcing all those concepts that they learned about sections of a report. The information or the pictures I'm showing here are from one of the stronger presentations we had this fall. This group was looking at putting solar canopies over the parking structures at the university airport. Okay, and so just to kind of give you a scale of the scope of these types of projects. And so this group actually went through and figured out cost of installing these structures. They went through some guidelines for getting grant money, so they were able to offset a bunch of the costs. They did some analysis with, okay, if we increase this amount on the parking fee, how much faster can we pay things off? And so they have to really kind of incorporate a lot of new concepts based on something that they were interested in. And so my student Kayla here, she was really, really interested in this heat island effect. And so that's what led her to this particular project. So outcomes, students have actually really liked the changes. They don't like the writing. That's still, it's a lot of work, okay? They don't like that, but they're not giving us feedback that says, well, I was already a better writer, this was a waste of time. They're saying it was a hard class, it was challenging, there were a lot of deadlines, okay? This technical writing piece, we're creating this longitudinal thread. So they're getting this technical writing in this course, and then it gets reinforced in a very similar format in some of our upper level 300 and 400 level courses. This is a great way we've found, and this is a byproduct of COVID, this is a great way that we actually engage our alumni. They are super impressed with the quality of presentations by the students, and they're just getting more involved. They all come back and say, put me on the list for the presentations next year. And so this is generating internship opportunities and networking with our undergrads at the freshman level. Future work really is around data collection. So we've been doing all these changes with internal data. Now we're going to start to work to share the numbers more in the near future. We're also going to be looking at longitudinal assessments. Now that we've done this a couple times, we can actually start to see if that stuff we talked about with writing, see if that's stuck all the way through. And so we're going to be really focused on this data collection coming up here. So with that, I thank you for your time. I took a little extra time, but yeah.